that we're live now. I would like to welcome everybody to the Building Diversity in the Makerspace webinar hosted by PCS Adventures. My name is Tyler Downey, and I'm a STEM specialist and the training coordinator here at PCS. And today we're going to be talking about diversity. So before we get started, a few logistical things. If you have never used GoToWebinar before, you should have a control panel on the right side of your screen that has a list of options. You can adjust the screen size of both the webcam and the slideshow to fit your preference. There is a microphone icon. We have everybody on mute while the discussion is going on, but if you have questions on the panel, about 2/3 of the way down, there's a spot where you can toggle the menu and enter a question, and we will gather up those questions and discuss the questions at the end of the webinar. Additionally, at the end of the webinar, if you have the time, there's a short list of survey questions about the webinar and about the process. So if you have time, we would appreciate it if you were able to fill those in for us. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. As I said, and we just, let's see. All right, my screen just went blank. Can you see my screen on that side? Okay. All right, sorry about that, folks. So just to introduce myself, as I said, my name is Tyler Downey. I am a former educator. I taught in the classroom for 17 years and spent much of that time focused on science and hands-on science. And so STEM is something that is close to my heart. I feel really fortunate to be here with our three panelists today discussing Makerspaces because they are exciting and they are essential. And so I'm just going to give a quick introduction to each of our panelists. So we'll start over on the end there. This is Nick Grove. He's the tech supervisor at Unbound Meridian, which is a public library makerspace. This is Erin Downey. She's the supervising librarian for the Boise School District. And Sonia Galaviz, who is a 5th grade teacher that has Makerspaces in her classroom. Okay, so, all right, good, thank you. So the agenda for today, brief introductions. We're going to go through a list of questions. I'm going to ask each panelist one question. They will share their answer, and then the others will have an opportunity to chime in. So it's going to be a live discussion. We're going to talk about first what exactly is a makerspace. We're going to talk about how we define diversity and why it matters in places like makerspaces. And then what are the challenges to increasing diversity in the makerspace and creative solutions met to meet that challenge. Okay. All right, so if you're ready, let's just go ahead and jump right in. So we're going to start with Nick. So Nick, what exactly are makerspaces?
So makerspaces are a place where people can get together to make, create, and collaborate on ideas, and all of them take different shapes, and the best ones take the shape of the community that they are serving and fill the needs and ideas that the community has to provide. But the biggest thing that a makerspace is the people. The people make the makerspace. The makers are the makerspace. Without makers, you don't have a space, a makerspace. You just have a really cool room with some fun toys in it. So a makerspace is built around a culture of failing forward, of collaboration, of cooperation, and of creativity. That's my view on what a makerspace is. I think all of them look different every time you go into one. You can go into one that's 40,000 square feet, and you can go into one that's 300 square feet. They're both going to have the same amount of charm to them and provide the set of tools and experiences that that community needs to meet what is available.
Erin, so how would you define makerspaces in the school system?
Within our libraries, makerspaces are often not dedicated spaces. We usually will carve out time for makerspace time. And what that does is it allows us to pull out different tools that let students experiment with either inquiry or creativity. Some are purely creative. I have a teacher who really likes, a librarian who likes quilting, and so her students do paper quilts, and they learn about geometry and how shapes fit together and tessellations, and create a construction paper quilt square. And then I have teachers who use Ozabots and Spheros for some more complicated coding challenges. Nick is totally right in saying that it really depends on the people, both the people who are managing the space and who are encouraging the creativity, and the participants themselves. They really define what it is that can be accomplished for that space and for that community.
Sonia, how about you in the classroom?
Sure. I mean, as you know, the other panelists have said, Makerspace depends on the community in which you're serving, but also it depends on the target, your goal of what you're trying to reach. So in the classroom, I think about how does it fit into my curriculum? How does this uptake a concept we're learning? How can I better integrate you know, different content areas, or how can I make meaning more rich through a Makerspace experience? So Makerspace also, you may have a tech Makerspace where you have the cubelets and the Ozabots and Spheros and you know, maybe some EV3 where you have a robotic space, but you also can do it with items that you have around your home. And so a lot of some of the Makerspace engineering challenges that we have are cardboard, you know, it's widgets that I found around the room, buttons and things that I have the students collect. And so we turn those through their creativity and only, you know, under the scope of their imagination, how do they execute the space and that design challenge, and, you know, and integrate it in whatever fashion we set forth. So it really is the scope of Makerspace really can be anything from things you would find around the house with a specific challenge all the way to more complicated robotics. But whatever the space is, it's meant to be really harvesting and channeling those 21st century skills that they are building together. They're collaborating, they're communicating, they're problem solving. There's that teamwork component. I don't believe that Makerspace is meant to be an isolated, singular activity. So it really is getting the kids to think together, a hands-on, minds-on time.
Thanks. That's a great lead into the follow-up question. Why are they important? You mentioned the 21st century skills. Why are those things important for students or for people in the general public?
We're preparing students for jobs that don't yet exist, and we don't know what we're trying to get them ready for. There's no way that we as adult people can even anticipate, even the most forward-thinking of us cannot anticipate where children who are 10 years old now are going to be working and what skills they're going to need. So the best that we can do is equip them with the right skills in order to identify and begin to solve their own problems as they come up.
And Makerspaces allow for great collaboration, and you have an opportunity to have students work with different people that they might not normally be friends with, that they get paired up and all of a sudden they have different ideas that are bouncing off of each other. And you get to see them interact in a way that you wouldn't see outside of a Makerspace setting. And you get to challenge them in ways that they might not have been challenged before. And those challenges can be uncomfortable at first, but once you establish the culture of failing is okay as long as we're continuing to move forward, you get a lot of new experiences. And I think that really sets why they are important. And to piggyback off what Erin said, Makerspaces also are a constant place of change. They're the only constant in a Makerspace is change. And building that into the identity of the space, along with what students are doing in the space, really helps further how important a Makerspace can be in preparing them for the future.
Anything else to add?
Sure, I'll try that. I think Makerspace it's important for a lot of reasons, but I love that it gives students the opportunity to uptake two-dimensional learning into a three-dimensional experience, that they're able to take their ideas and their problem solving and really like solutions for current events or whatever application to the content, and develop something like an actual tangible, thing that they can work together and collaborate to help really further their connections to whatever the challenge is or the curriculum. But they really do love having a three-dimensional thing that they're working on, whether it's with robotics or whether it's they're actually creating a space or creating, a small city to solve a problem, and that they're able to articulate it. It gives students the opportunity to write about it, to talk about it, to share ideas with each other, to disagree with each other on different solutions. I just feel like the possibilities are endless, and it's always finding a way to create the time and the space for the kids, because they will really run with it. It's a great opportunity.
I think one of the things I've heard all of us talk about is being able to be responsive to what it is that your community needs right then. And so it kind of makes me think of, because I'm from library world, it makes me think of the room of requirement in Harry Potter, where you stand outside and you think of the thing that you need the most, and then you open the door and then there it is. And I think this is a really good opportunity to be that for our educators, for our community, and for our students. Whatever they need, this is a place where they can go and work it out and figure it out, and then learn what they need to from it.
And I just want to comment, thank you, Erin, and also that the teacher or the facilitator does not have to be the expert on anything, in fact, for that space, for exactly whatever the student is creating or the idea they're wrestling with, or something that they want to uptake into to a three-dimensional learning. I don't have to be the expert on what their idea is. Mm-hmm. All I have to be is a facilitator and a guide, and ask some really key questions and help them tease through it. And that's what's really amazing about these types of spaces, is we can uptake and facilitate any idea they have, and not be expected to have all the answers, because that's the job of learning together.
I was about to say the exact same thing. I think that is one of the biggest pieces for a facilitator in a makerspace, is to incorporate that sense of it's okay to fail, it's okay not to know, and not just to teach it to the makers, but to also live it themselves and be comfortable with being able to say, I don't know, but, and learning shoulder to shoulder, directing people towards the resources that they need. That's one of the first things that I teach my staff when I get them, is to be comfortable saying that they don't know. I don't know is not the answer, it's the start of a conversation, and the conversation is how you build an idea, and ideas are what drive a makerspace. So.
And isn't that relieving to you as a person in charge of things, that to realize that you're not actually all that in charge, and it's okay, you don't have to be? I think a lot of our audience, and I think a lot of people in education in particular who are wanting to get into making and makerspaces, feel really intimidated because they don't know all the things. But actually knowing all of the things is going to keep you from learning some new and interesting things. This is a place where you can step back and let students be experts, and let students learning really drive what it is that you do. It's a nice opportunity not to be the boss of everything, and to be the person who is in charge of guiding all aspects of the experience. You let the experience be what it is, and it's actually kind of a relief. So for people who are intimidated, there's really a lot of letting go that you get to do once you get a culture like this established.
It's hard to create that at the beginning. One of the things that I helped establish when we started doing makerspaces in our library setting was, rather than learning the ins and outs of every tool and toy that I got, as soon as I got it, I would put it out on our Thursday Makerspace day, and I would let the kids teach me what the tool was meant to do, or what they were able to do with it, more likely, because the instruction manual wasn't necessarily how they used it. That was where we went when we got completely stuck, and allowing them to guide the activity and guide the learning process was really relieving, and it allowed me to pull out all of the tools and toys that I had, rather than one or two things at a time. And that's one of the things that I've seen in spaces where people are hesitant because they haven't had a chance to go through steps 1 through 10 to understand how to use something, and so it sits in a box for a year and a half.
Right. you know, educators can be really controlling sometimes, and I'll say that as well. A lot of us are type A, and you know, we want to control the area, control the space, make sure that it's going in the order that we want it to. But it is like, you know, our panelists are saying, and Erin saying, that there's a freedom that comes with relinquishing some of that power in a good way, to where the experts in the room, it is an expectation that we all are sharing knowledge with each other, and that we all are trying to teach each other how to be, you know, more creative, or how do we think through a challenge, or how a suggestion for how you might go about solving a particular problem. I learned in Makerspace and with STEM camps or any of the things that I do, I had to check my ego a long time ago and really like humble myself before the students to be able to say, I don't know, but let's figure it out together. And they love that. And for the children to be put in a position of authority, and really where they're taking ownership of their learning, and they get to teach the other kids, and they get to teach their teacher, or they get to teach the facilitator, all of a sudden you see an additional layer of pride, where they're excited about what they've created, and they're wanting to bring others into it and share their learning. And really, we just get to step back and really awe in what the students are doing, and make sure that space continues.
That's, yeah, some really great stuff. What I'm hearing you guys saying, and you know, in reading, is that it's not about the tools. A makerspace can have the highest tech robots and stuff, or it can be popsicle sticks and pipe cleaners. That it's really about those processes and, you know, problem solving, teamwork, all those, again, like you mentioned at the beginning, those 21st century skills that are going to apply no matter what the jobs of the future are. So awesome. You guys ready to move on to the next question here? So this one's going to be for you to start, Sonia.
Sure.
The topic of our webinar is diversity, right? And how we make our makerspaces more diverse. So what exactly, or how exactly would you define diversity, and why does it matter in a place like the makerspace?
Sure. I think when we think of diversity, often it's framed within the scope of demographics, right? What ethnic minorities do we have present? Do we have, you know, girls present in the makerspace? Maybe we're looking at socioeconomic status. So that definitely has a place for, you know, looking at the numbers of who's attending your makerspace, but more so than that is who has access, who has opportunity to be able to experience this and have the chance to do a, you know, makerspace and be in that frame. Beyond demographic, we also want to remember that diversity is a variety of experiences, a variety of, you know, background of the families, and honoring the community that's within your outreach. And so when we think of makerspace and access and opportunity for a diversity of kiddos, we want to make sure that we are being very intentional with our outreach into the community. There's an enormous amount of research that talks about how STEM identities, science and math identities, are really being framed in and cemented between the ages of 10 and 14. So for me, I'm an elementary school teacher. I'm biased towards elementary kiddos. The littles, they're my people, you know, but I want to emphasize that these makerspace opportunities are so critical with the young kids, because they are deciding in elementary school whether science is for them, whether technology is for them, whether math is for them. And when you look at it in that frame, how great is the need that we bring in these opportunities as early as possible, facilitate that creativity, give them opportunities to create a STEM identity and have a STEM background where they've had success and they've had a lot of fun with it. So when we're intentional with our outreach, trying to increase diversity, we need to make sure that we are lowering or eliminating the barriers that keeps diverse learners from attending a makerspace. So if it's an after-school program, if it's something that's on the weekends, if it's at your local library, right off the get, because, you know, I work in a very diverse population, transportation is huge. Whether you can feed them, that is significant. Is there a cost associated with it? I think cost is probably one of the biggest barriers. So this is where you got to learn how to hustle. You know, that's just the way it is. You think, where are the community partnerships? Who are the sponsors? Who are invested industry? Who has a heart and a soul for what we're doing here? And so the best you can, make it no cost or low cost, help, get the families there. When I look at recruiting diversity into these spaces from our ethnic minority population and in Boise, our refugee population, take the time to get some of the flyers translated into the target languages of who you want to attend. Being able to communicate and honor the families that I took the time to get it in Swahili and Arabic because I want your kiddos there. A few key phone calls to, community leaders within some of the different areas where they, congregate, that goes a long way. So if I contact some of the leaders and say, hey, we're having this space, it's free of charge, we're going to be doing, these cool things, my attendance rates are really high. And once you hook kids and get them seeing that, hey, this space is for me, and this teacher or, this facilitator loves me and wants me to, have fun and be successful, then the work of it does itself, because then they're recruiting brothers and sisters. They're telling their, neighbors that they want to go. So just make sure you're really intentional to the participants. And, when we think about the design or the engineering challenge or whatever opportunities they have there in the makerspace, being intentional to the cultures present within the room too. There's a lot of space for that culturally responsive makerspace, I think, and whether that is uptaking a current event, letting them solve an engineering challenge, based on something that's happening in our country that they're, hearing about, letting them create something that reminds them of home, letting them tell a story through a hands-on 3D experience, makes it all the more meaningful for your learners, because they're not all the same. Even if you have a room of seemingly a homogeneous population, each of them come with unique stories, and they want to be heard. We all just want to be heard. So allowing that space for kids to bring their true selves, to the makerspace and to their creative ideas, and allowing them the space to honor each other. That those voices and those different cultures and the diversity within the room is really cherished, and that's something that we want to create a space for. And so I work, I work hard to make sure that barriers are eliminated the best as possible, and that we have different language supports. I think Makerspace is one of the most effective frames or spaces that you can provide to where you don't have to be proficient in English to be successful at it. They don't have to be an expert or a robotic whiz to be successful at it. It's highly engaging, it's hands-on, it's minds-on, it's easy for students to mentor each other. So there's no excuse for not trying it with kids and letting them mentor each other. One other thing on the intentionality of your target, of who you're outreach for, is finding those mentors within the community. If you're noticing within your makerspace that, hardly ever have any girls attend, or that it's not, it's not 50-50, it's not what I want it to be. Find those community partners or industry leaders that they're usually more than willing to come and spend some of their time, that are representative of the culture and the diversity you're going for. So if I want to talk about robotics and I want more girls to show up, I'm going to bring some female leaders within that industry that can talk to our girls about what this looks like, how is it actually used out in the real world, careers, etc. And also bringing in people of color and of diverse backgrounds around Idaho, so kids see a reflection of themselves. They see that, oh, this is a thing for other people in my community, and that they see that mirrored image, that that itself speaks the language of possibility, because that's what we're talking about here, is creating a space and an opportunity that they can see all the possibilities for themselves and around our city. And I'll be quiet now. Sorry about that.
I think you bring up, Sonia, some really good points, especially about diversity. We almost, especially in education, we use that to describe demographic diversity, or which means racial or income-based. But we also are accommodating different learning styles, preferences, and priorities. And really, quality makerspace programming is going to take that into account as well. I mentioned earlier my librarian who was nervous about the tech part part of Makerspaces. So she went with quilting because that's what she was comfortable with. And so being able to provide opportunities to say, you know what, if this isn't your thing, we can find other ways to solve that problem or meet your interest or produce a thing that you're interested in. And different people have different priorities. So coming into STEM and saying, well, STEM is the way to get a really good income. That's how you get a good job when you grow up. That's not the top priority for every single student or every single family. Some others might be interested in artistic fulfillment or something else like that, being able to support a family. It's not necessarily all about income driven. So assuming that the priorities, even for all of our community members, are the same, is something we need to sort of back up and take into account as we're planning these programs.
I think one thing that I would add to the diversity conversation is something that we don't necessarily take stock of when we're thinking about diversity. I did an after-school program for teens for many years with Makerspace activities. And one of the things that I saw was when I first started, I had my library kids. So my regular library users, the kids that came in, they came to my book clubs, they came to my teen advisory boards. We could sit and talk about the newest novels that came out. And then I had a whole bunch of after school kids who were there in between sports practice, or they're about to go down to the skate park. And so they weren't my traditional library user. However, when we got Makerspace activities, we were able to get all of those different people to the table to come together and work together. And the Makerspace allowed for a safe place for all of them to interact together in a way that they hadn't necessarily done before. It's not who they hung out with in the cafeteria at school. It's not who they hung out with on the weekends. But when they came to the library to do Makerspace activities, it didn't matter what their interest was outside of what we were working on. And so it brought a diversity of interests together in one room. And I think that really expanded on what we were able to do and how we were able to grow what we did with that program.
And that's one of the things I'm really concerned about when we talk about self-selected programs. In other words, where participation is something someone decides to do, and if you don't want to do it, you just don't, is that I think it favors a certain kind of kid or student or participant, someone who can already see themselves with, as Sonia mentioned, this language of possibility, someone who already sees this as something for them. So finding ways, and I think that she was absolutely right on target talking about integrating it into instructional practice, and this, particularly in schools where we kind of have a captive audience of all kids. This is a really good time to start challenging some of those beliefs and opening up these types of programs for students who maybe otherwise would not self-select, because we can take all the barriers away that we want for access, but if the student doesn't think it's for them, it still doesn't matter. It's still not reaching them because they're not going to choose to go.
That's a really, really significant point for educators, because I know, especially in elementary, we have about 1,500 things that need to happen during the day and 6.5 hours to make the magic happen, right? And so it becomes, how on earth do I create the time to be able to justify? Maybe you do have to justify to an administrator or justify just to your schedule of what, 7 subjects looks like. So, integration is the key for sure, but creating, the time and the frame for a makerspace to be able to uptake what you're already teaching. So, and I'll give you a real concrete example. So we're just wrapping up the American Revolution in my classroom, and they had to write about it and they had to research about it, but where we did Makerspaces, they had to design the Freedom Trail in Boston, highlighting different key events in Boston leading up to the American Revolution, and they had to program their Ozobot to follow the trail and the Freedom Trail and go to certain spots around Boston of where these key events happened. So like Erin is saying is, they didn't have a choice, they had to do it, so it wasn't, they got to opt in or opt out, they loved it. So it was a team activity, they had to problem solve together, they had to refer back to their research on what were the key events around Boston that they needed to highlight in the Freedom Trail. The creativity was theirs, the design was theirs, the coding, we had, a very easy entry-level robot, for them to show what, the path of the freedom trail. So all of those things are really doable within the frame of the context and the content that you're teaching in the classroom. It's just really making yourself create that space and time, and then stepping back and let the students uptake it, and made their learning of that historical event and that time period much more rich.
And I think you're totally onto something with this idea of kind of the mandatory fun aspect of this.
Right.
So when I say you have to do this robot activity, that makes failure have like lower stakes. So if I pick to do robots and I'm bad at it, that feels worse than somebody made me do robots and I wasn't all that good at it. So it takes that fear away for students, and then they can get in and noodle and realize it's fine. I mean, we're constantly in the process of failing forward, but if we're too scared to even try, then that learning is never going to happen at all. Right. So when we provide opportunities for student learning that are maybe not opt-inable, where you just have to do it, that takes some of that fear away, because everybody's got to, and there's always that kind of fallback of like, well, she made me do robots, and I was scared and I wasn't really going to be good at it, so it's okay that I wasn't. And then suddenly they're blossoming and they're doing a great job because they're not afraid of doing that job.
Yeah.
I would say one of the other pieces of diversity is the skill set that each student brings, and being able to capitalize on that skill set. So if you're doing a project and you say, I want you to take apart these machines and make something new. And so everyone, grabs things, tools to tear apart old computers or whatever. And you have one kid who is really good at soldering. So he sets up at the soldering station, and all of a sudden he's teaching his friend, and she's now an expert solderer also. And people are bringing their projects over to get soldered and take on to the next piece where they work together on building, a robotic component out of mixed pieces of old hardware. And so you have self-identified experts who then teach other people in the room, and they get to share what they know and be excited about sharing what they know. And once you have a team of people that are soldering, the expert and then gets to move on and go be an expert in something else that someone else is teaching, or learn something new from scratch. And so having a diversity of skill sets and really identifying who is interested or skilled in something and allowing them to showcase those skills, I think is a good way to enhance some of the diversity within the populations that we're serving.
It also helps manage the space for facilitators or educators within a makerspace, because if you have 30 plus kids, mercy. I mean, that can be, it can be really, overwhelming if I was the only one managing that space. And so when kids are the experts, then that relieves some of the pressure off of me, where I can just say, who's running tech support on the drones? It ain't me, right? And so that's where they know these 3 kids are doing that. Or who knows how to cut cardboard where I don't trash it? I still can't do it. And so where if they're creating something with cardboard, and that's another group of kids, or who knows how to do this. So as you said, Nick, they self-select and they're the expert, and it's just, I'm just, facilitating, sending kids to who are the experts in the room. And again, the ownership and the pride that they take is awesome, and it's a management savior for me. So I'm not doing all of it because I can't. You can't be everywhere.
Another diverse spectrum that I see, and you'll probably recognize this too in your students, is rather than a diversity of skills, it's kind of a diversity of grit or perseverance. There's a huge spectrum of how much ambiguity, how much challenge, how much failure an individual person can take. And that's something we have to address as well, is that I can give one student a challenge that takes 100 tries to get it right, and they're totally fine with it. And I can give another student the same challenge, and after the first failed attempt, they're just done. And so being able to build in that kind of diversity as well, so that it accommodates kids who can handle that very iterative thinking, and maybe kids who need a little bit of like instant reward or some instant positive feedback so that they can continue to go forward.
Good point.
All right, that is awesome. We are moving right along. Okay, so our next question here, and you guys kind of did share some of your experiences on that. So we're going to move right on to what are some of the challenges of getting diversity in the makerspace? So Erin, we're going to start with you. When we talk about these kinds of diversity, what are some of the barriers that you're likely to run into?
One of our very biggest challenges is students not seeing themselves either in STEM careers, in activities like this, or especially when you're looking at makerspaces in the library, which is what I work with, kids who just don't see themselves in the library are never going to go. So kids who don't feel represented by the collection or by the programming that the library offers aren't going to show up to Makerspace in the library. So it's really important to have comprehensive collection development and programming within the library to accommodate students of different cultures and preferences and priorities and all of the different spectrum of students that we have. But some of the biggest obstacles really are financial. We've got to say it, because education, it's a constant problem. We just don't have the money to get the things that we want. One of the reasons for that is sort of goes into reason number 3 for me, is that often this kind of thinking, making and crafting and problem solving and all of these kind of activities are often perceived as these extra or enrichment activities. They're not core curriculum. So number 1, financial resources are not always devoted to those because it's extra. And then when you're looking at standardized test scores and prioritizing what you need to do with certain groups of students and what certain groups of students need to spend their academic time doing, oftentimes students of color or students who are experiencing poverty tend to have lower standardized test scores in reading and math. And so when educational decision makers are looking at how to improve their academic experience, they're going to see those low scores and say, well, this person doesn't have time for extra academic, extracurricular enrichment activities. They need to be doing math exercises. They need to be learning fractions. They can't do this extra stuff. And so this idea of open-ended exploration isn't very measurable, although there is tons of research that says in the long term, it really does improve mathematical thinking and verbal response and reading comprehension, but it doesn't translate to the way that we currently measure students. And so I think it gets sidelined in a lot of ways from the educational experience. It's not prioritized. For the students who need it the very most, it's not often available to them. And for students who are already set up demographically to do well in school, so generally students who are white and upper income, they get access to these opportunities because they've met their academic standards. And so they get to go on and do the extra programming and participate in these activities. And that's unfortunate, because probably a lot of the reasons why certain demographic groups are not achieving as well on our standardized measures are that we're not measuring things like how much grit and resilience do you have? How much willingness do you have to continue to solve a problem when you don't get the answer the first time? Talk to me about your general problem solving process. If we focused on some of those skills, it might be that translates to higher scores. But until those higher scores happen, we're not going to prioritize anything besides increase academic math worksheets and reading comprehension tests and things like that. So that really keeps us from offering these experiences to a diversity of students.
And I'd like to jump in with that. So I would always say when I'm talking about makerspaces that a 3D printer does not make a makerspace. But when we got ours, it really was one of those things that was a hook. And having a hook to draw people into your makerspace, into your activities, is really important. It doesn't matter what that hook is. It can be a new piece of technology, it can be a really fun program, but having a hook to draw people in is really important. And I had a student in my after-school program who would come and hang out, and one of the biggest hooks I always had was food, because you can't go wrong having food. Like, you will get people if you have food, especially teenagers. Yeah. But he came to the library, and he'd been coming there for at least 2 years, and I knew that he hadn't read a book in that entire time. And as part of getting our 3D printer, I made a deal with him that if he read at least the first chapter of this book, then we could work on a 3D print project together when I had some off desk time on that Saturday. And I gave him a book, and he decided that he didn't have anything else to do. By the time he left, he was already 5 chapters in. By the end of the next 2 weeks, we were working on designing the logo from the cover of the book, and trying to figure out how we could work together to create a 3D image of this flat 2D image on a book cover and make it into a 3D printed object. And this was in the early stages of 3D printing, and so there weren't a lot of tools out there. So we were coming up with our own tools and measurement systems and kind of learning together to use the 3D printer. But through this, we were also using literacy. We were using math, we were using art. We used all of the different disciplines to come together, and at the end, we were able to make a replica of the logo from the book, and from that, he went on to finish the trilogy of that series of books, and became an admin. He was very happy about the fact that he had read those books, and he shared it with his other non-reader friends, the kids, that they would much rather go down to the skate park than come hang out and talk books with me in the library. And so it broke down some barriers that were already there for that group of students, and allowed us to talk not only about cool 3D printing and the makers tools that I was getting, but also a new avenue into how do I incorporate reading into the fun stuff that I like to be able to get out and geek out about and talk about all the cool tech toys. And so it was a good bridge. And another piece that I just wanted to talk about in terms of getting diversity into makerspaces, from a public library perspective, there's two different things that are really important. The first is outreach and being unafraid to leave your space. That means getting outside of your four walls and going to where the people are. And one of the easiest ways for a public library to do that is to go into classrooms, go into school libraries, and partner. And that's the second piece. Be a good partner. Be a partner with your library, your school, your business community, your community maker spaces. Being a good partner with places like PCS that provide resources, and learning who all has something to offer and being a willing partner to go in and work together to give our audiences, our makers, our students, the tools, resources, and experiences that they need. I think that's a big way to break down those barriers, is to really put yourself and what you have to offer out there.
I love that idea of partnership, because hopefully you don't feel limited by the lack of stuff if you're still if you're in the building stage or just setting the foundation for your makerspace. So even though I'm a 5th grade teacher and a STEM coordinator for my building, we don't have a 3D printer. But 2 years ago, where I'm like, gosh dang, I want my kids to see what that is and how people use it and how it applies and where is it used in the medical field. So I called up my local library, and we took the city bus and we went down to the Boise Public Library, and they had a big presentation for free. She was over the moon. So we had a field trip out of it, all for free, got to see how the 3D printing worked. And then she let the students know that, hey, we do this every Thursday for free. You can come in and do your own 3D printing. The kids were like, what? Where's this, secret treasure been hiding all this time? And so finding the people around you in your community that are doing this work as well, and that can help supplement what you're trying to create. And so finding those partnerships. There's also lots of places who will lend or loan things, that if you're wanting to do something to highlight robotics, your local colleges and universities often have student organizations that are doing that work. We're very lucky here at PCS to where they have an enormous bank of things that are available that you can uptake in a variety of different ways, and I'm sure they'll talk about that. But then, connecting yourself to organizations like the STEM Action Center, finding who are the mentors in my area that can help me with this frame that I'm thinking about, or who can help me with materials. There's a lot of evangelists out there for this kind of work. 3 of them are sitting right here. And I know we would, field some emails of like helping us connect each other, because we are a network of people that love this work and believe in our students and realize like this is how you begin to shift identity and really promote that language of possibility within our students. We believe in it, and we believe in working together. So we're not alone in this endeavor. You got it, but you gotta hustle. You gotta be willing to go out and have the conversations and see like who's doing this work. How can I bring it in? How can I go to that space and really find a way to work it to be able to get this opportunity to your students?
I do want to piggyback off something Nick said early. I was describing incentivizing use of maker materials.
Bribery. He said it was bribery.
That's true, but I also want to caution that oftentimes our conceptions of what constitutes good behavior or good academic achievement may actually be a barrier to kids. So if we're looking at what the systemic obstacles that we're erecting in order to get to maker things, if we're saying, if you don't sit in your chair and behave like you need to, then you don't get to use the 3D printer. We need to be really cautious of rules like that, because that is going to disenfranchise certain groups of kids. Kids who maybe have ADHD or have an inability to sit still. So while bribery is a great idea, food giving in order to do this is a great idea, creating blanket rules about you can only participate if is another way of disenfranchising, often disproportionately boys, lower income students, and students of poverty. So it's great to have some incentives, but to be careful not to use some of those things as a punishment, so you can only access them if that's doing the opposite of what we're looking for.
And really find, as educators and facilitators of these experiences, we can be really sneaky in a good way of how I work in reading and writing. I've had students attend my Makerspace or, my camps that would rather eat their own arm than read a book, but they really want to build and they want to explore and they want to do the tech and the drones and the bots. But I can sneak into it, so if they come up, there's a problem, right? They have an engineering problem or something's not working, and I'm just like, what? I wonder if there's a guide or a manual or something that would tell us like how to work through this problem. I can't do it right now because I'm working with this student. Watch them get out the guide and do some reading, get on the computer, do some research, and figure out how to solve that problem, because the engagement and the incentive is embedded in what they wanted to do in the first place. So it's not an additional layer of work. I'm not making them do it. I'm saying we have to do this to be able to solve the problem, and I need you to facilitate it on your own. And they'll do it. They will do it because they're motivated to do something that maybe they haven't had traditional success with, to be able to, solve the problem so they can fly the drone or that they can build what they were wanting to. It's really nice that it works that way. And offering those extensions, and again, for educators that are in the classroom, building this into the curriculum they're already teaching. Again, you've got 28 levels of support of other kids who can help problem solve, so everybody can be successful.
Yeah. Looking at those academic skills as tools to problem solving is huge. We are getting close to out of time. Before we run out of time, we want to take some questions. Do we have questions available?
Looking for some more support and resources on where people can find information about Makerspaces.
Okay, so one thing I do want to mention to all the viewers is that at the end of the webinar, there is a document available that has a list of websites that we all looked at and shared before we began the webinar on diversity in the Makerspace. And so that's a really good place to start. That document's a PDF, there are live links there, so you can just download that and use that for a stepping stone to trying to answer your specific questions. Was that it in terms of questions?
That was pretty much it.
All right, well, that was great. That was a little bit shorter than I was expecting. We had about 5 to 10 minutes. You guys want to just have any last thoughts or last things you want to share?
I'd say on it, not knowing the situation for every audience member here on the webinar of what you're looking at, that Makerspace, I think Nick referred to it, it does not have to be an entire room dedicated to it. One thing that at Garfield, we're trying to think, like, how do we be intentional and useful for all of the different teachers on their levels of comfortability with Makerspace, So one thing that I'm working on right now is designing like Makerspace kits, like something that would be like in a tub. You know, if you can imagine just, you know, a tub that you can take to your classroom or to, you know, around the school or in the community, that there could be a specific engineering challenge or something, and everything, you know, sort of fits in the tub. It doesn't have to be the, you know, a warehouse level of materials or something really fancy, you know, like EV3 robotics. It doesn't have to be that complicated. Another thing that I heard as feedback from the teachers in my building is, again, it goes back to that. They want to be able to justify why they're doing this. They want to be able to cover their tails if, you know, like, why are you letting kids build these cardboard, you know, cities? That to tie it back to literacy as well. And so we're in the process of designing picture book Makerspace kits. So with a book, you know, selecting literature that would have like either an embedded challenge or a Makerspace opportunity or creative uptake from the story or imagining a character's point of view and designing whatever. But again, like fitting in a tote, that's something teachers could take back to their rooms and allow that space and be able to pack it back up, because sometimes Makerspace, it can get a little wild with just the amount of stuff, and so you have to be prepared for that. But, you know, framing it in a way where it still makes it accessible and not lowering the stress level for teachers of like, oh, I have to have all of this materials and all of this background knowledge. No, like we can make, you know, small entry points to make it doable for everybody.
And I think if you're looking at where to start, I think the best two guidelines there are start with a real thing. So something you're already teaching, some natural phenomenon that you've noticed, a book, something. So start in the real world and then find an area of interest. If you don't have both of those things, you're making a lot more work for yourself that you're doing unnecessarily.
And I think one of the biggest pieces, like I'll go back to one of the very first things that I said when we started about an hour ago, it's about people. It's about understanding your people and creating programs that interest them and tools that interest them, ideas that interest them, and challenging them individually, collectively. All of that has to be played in as a facilitator. When you're trying to find, you know, a time that works for your space, if you're not in a classroom, you know, find a time where you're going to get the audience that you're looking for and make it as easy for them to be there as possible. I think that there are other things that you can do to be ready. So when you have all of these materials that are sitting around, you also have to be creative. And, you know, let's say you have to come up with a 5-minute project. All of a sudden, first thing you see is a big bin of Lego bricks, and you see copy paper. You're like, okay, well, we are going to get in groups of 5, and we're going to see who can span this table, these 2 tables that are 6 feet apart using only bricks and paper. You have 5 minutes. Go. And then that 5 minutes gives you time to like give a more collective thought on what's the next 45 minutes going to look like in terms of direction and how you want to do things. So if you're pressed for time, be creative, think on your feet, and be a maker yourself. Because if you're not a maker and have that maker mentality, it's really hard to pass it on to the students that are in your space.
I actually had a question come in when you guys were speaking. In what ways do you believe the Makerspace movement enhances or competes with traditional education, and will it become equal to core competencies?
Wish.
I think for me, I think it enhances the content and the curriculum I'm currently teaching. So it's that uptake that, like I said before, from a 2-dimensional understanding to really a 3-dimensional creative process where students are able to design within a historical frame or within a particular content area as Erin was mentioning earlier, that it often is not seen as rigorous as a traditional, book study or research, report. But it is, and we need to advocate. We need to be the evangelists that are talking about the rigor and the grit and the perseverance that is required to exist in that space and utilize Makerspace to make connections. Because if you're embedding it within the content areas, they're having to make connections and do some reading and writing about it and justify what their design and incorporate it in a variety of different ways. But the fact of the matter remains is we have substantial gaps in our STEM careers that are out there of people who are able to fill it, not only with the science and technology and math content, understanding of actual, ready for it to be job ready, but the 21st century skills that are needed. We are hearing over and over from local industry that they do not have the soft skills. Our workforce doesn't know how to communicate or problem solve or work in a team. And so that's what we're doing with these spaces as well. And so we have to continue to advocate for that space to incorporate those 21st century skills, connect to the content, and allow students some creativity so that may transfer into a career later in life.
Another one coming as well. So the panelists mentioned the resources from PCS. What products do they offer to educators who want to start their makerspaces?
Well, that's one for me, I think. We have a whole variety of products that would be excellent for starting makerspaces. Two that come to mind are our STEM carts. We have, I'm going to advance it forward here on the slide. So the Discover STEM Lab for grades 3 and 4 comes with 4 different sections, one for science, technology, engineering, and math that all contain 12 lessons each of activities, hands-on activities that students can use in a self-guided way. So they're meant to be exploratory rather than dictatorial. The teacher does not need to be right there with students at all times. So open-ended exploration is the goal of the Discover STEM Lab carts. We also have one for 5th and 6th grade covering roller coaster physics, which is a very intensive hands-on experience. They actually construct a working roller coaster. They discover robotics and engineering, discover engineering and renewable energy. In particular, renewable energy incorporates a lot of math skills into the real life putting together of solar powered devices, and again, 12 lessons in each of those. And besides those two products, we do have a 30-year history of working for people in hands-on learning. And so there are a variety of products and options for whole curriculum to after-school program to individual one-off. And so if you're interested in any of those, by all means, you can go to our website, contact one of the people that work here at PCS, and we'll be happy to help you navigate through all the things that we offer. All right, do we have any more questions?
Oh, one came in the last second. I'm a foreign language teacher. I find integrating STEAM challenging as there are not many resources available. Do you guys have any ideas? Have you seen it integrated into your workplaces?
Could you repeat that one more time?
I'm a foreign language teacher. They're integrating STEAM. It finds that integrating STEAM is challenging and that there are not many resources available. Do you guys have any ideas, and how have you integrated it into your workplaces?
Yeah, it's an interesting good question. I think going back to something that Sonia said in the beginning about putting those resources and like trying to cater to a demographic. In terms of foreign language, if it's not something that you yourself were able to do, finding somebody in that community to help you translate and recruit people that are interested to help start the foundations of that community.
And without knowing the context of the person who asked the question, if they're trying to integrate STEAM challenges into their classroom, like into the foreign language class, I think a makerspace would be a perfect opportunity to explore the country of the target language that you're looking for. So if you're in a Spanish class, that maybe different kids are uptaking and creating some of the indigenous ruins of that area, and then they have to present using that target language. that they're able to maybe look at some of things that archaeologists have uncovered and design a use for it that maybe we don't understand, yet. So, or something like I was talking about with the American Revolution and having an Ocelot go through a historical, site with specific historical events, doing something very similar within the context of a different country, again, utilizing those target vocabulary and target language within that context of a STEAM space or a STEAM challenge. I could talk about that all day. That would be another webinar altogether, like how do you integrate the two? So I see, allow yourself the time to create that space within the classroom and have the kids hit target vocab, target, verbs and conjugations that you want them to, but within the context of what they created or what they designed.
I would also say that if you're talking about foreign language students in terms of English as a second language and bringing that into those classrooms, when you pull out maker supplies, they don't, cardboard, duct tape, scissors, pipe cleaners, those don't have language written on them, and they can be taught in any language without a lot of instruction. And I think, breaking down the barrier of what can be done is really, it's not that hard to make that next step. And it can be done for any age group, for any language. You bring out supplies and say, we're building today. And the activity kind of leads itself in a lot of ways. And with a little bit of direction, you can have some really cool projects that take place.
Awesome. All right, well, we have hit our hour mark, over by just a couple of minutes actually. So I want to thank all of our panelists today, Sonia, Erin, Nick. This was fantastic. Thank you very much. I would like to let the viewers know that this webinar will be available to view within a couple of days. You can just go to the page where you signed up, and it will be available for download along with the document that has the further reading on it. And again, if you are interested in any of the PCS products, you can contact either sales at Edventures or info@edventures.com. All right, thanks everybody.